And I know you've been following our coverage a bit and say we have it almost right, but not totally right on what happened that day when you and Jack Posobiec and Libs of TikTok's Chaya Raichik, a bunch of well-known right-leaning influencers were invited to the White House. So tell us how that went down.
That's right. And I appreciate your curiosity and your coverage of this. I think most of President Trump's base doesn't consider this to be a closed case. Most of us have outstanding questions, and we should have outstanding questions. But if you go back to that day in February, one of the misunderstandings, I think, is we weren't invited to the White House to receive the Epstein binders, those infernal white binders. We weren't invited for that purpose. We weren't even invited to meet specifically with Attorney General Pam Bondi. We were invited to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance. In fact, a couple weeks prior to that meeting, I had received a text message inviting me to come to the White House to meet with the vice president, and no reason was given for the visit. And I remember turning to my husband at the time and being like, oh, I bet they're calling me to the White House to scold me, because I had just been on Glenn Beck's radio program I think the day before, criticizing President Trump's executive order on in vitro and suggesting that there might be a better way to help heal the chronic infertility crisis in our country. And I said, oh, I bet they want to have some words with me about that. And I kind of laughed about it, but you get invited to the White House, you go. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. It's so cool. It's so incredible there. I asked them, I was like, oh yeah, what's this in reference to? And they had mentioned like, oh, it's a group meeting with the vice president. I was like, sure, I'll be there, of course. So I go that day to the White House, and I didn't know who else was invited. I actually didn't know the names of any of the people that were also going to be in that room with us until we were standing in the security line in Secret Service together outside the White House. And I see these various, prominent conservatives, especially on X. You can call them influencers, you can call them independent journalists, but pretty prominent conservative voices, independent journalists. So we go into the White House and we are taken into, I was actually a couple minutes late because my flight was delayed that morning. I had flown in at the crack of dawn. And we're in the room, the cabinet room, which is right across the hall from the Oval Office. And there's nameplates at each chair. We're all expected. This is not just a tour of the White House. This is where our meeting is. And the meeting's being chaired by the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who explains to us the purpose of the visit. The purpose of the visit, she said, was because the mainstream media, the corporate media, is no longer going to be rewarded by the Trump administration for their lying and their smears, their propagandizing on behalf of the other side. Instead, the White House is going to, in a sense, coronate a new media. You are going to get access, she told us, to high-ranking decision makers and cabinet secretaries at the White House, because the mainstream media shouldn't be given that kind of access when they have just lied and smeared and cheated President Trump. And so the schedule for the day, we're told, is we are going to have meetings with a lot of these different cabinet secretaries and decision makers, and we're going to have a forum to ask them questions, to network with them, to get to know them, just to integrate our media efforts into the White House. And so that's what happened. It was actually it's a very cool initiative from the White House. It was an interesting experience. We met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and HH Secretary RFK. That was an interesting discussion. We met with Vice President Vance, of course. We met with Caroline Leavitt. And then we meet with Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. And I have to say, that was the shortest meeting of all, because during our meeting with the vice president, we had an unexpected guest come into the room from across the hall. The president himself, Donald Trump, knocked on the door, stuck his head in and said, hey, I heard there were famous people in here. And then he looked at us all and he goes, which one of you is the most famous? Always the stand-up comedian, very entertaining, very entertaining. We, of course, are cracking up, and
I hope you said
it's
me.
Someone else.
It's me. I hope everyone said it.
It was like everyone was pointing to someone else because everyone wanted to be a little bit humble. It was fun. It was funny. But when we're sitting down with Attorney General Pam Bondi, she's telling us a little bit about some of the initiatives that they're doing at the Department of Justice. Good stuff that they're doing. And then she brings out these banker boxes full of the white binders. And she lifts one of these white binders out of the box. And of course, we're sitting at the same table with her. We see on the front of the binders that cover sheet that reads the most transparent administration in history, the Epstein Files Phase 1. And we all take a collective gasp like, oh my goodness, what is in these files? Are we really getting this? And to her credit, Attorney General Bondi very quickly clarified, no, this is not the dirt. This is not the juicy stuff. This is what I was given. She said, when I got to office, I immediately requested the Epstein files be brought to me. She's like, and this is all I was given. She's like, and I was skeptical. I was like, this is it? This tiny little stack of papers? And she's like, I was assured this is it. And she said, so I was going to release this to the American people, even though there's nothing new or interesting or juicy in here. She's like, until yesterday, I received communication from a whistleblower who told me that the SDNY was hiding truckloads of documents. And she told us, Attorney General Pam Bondi said that day at the White House, videos and pictures, the lists, the juicy stuff, all the dirt that people are expecting. The SDNY is subverting the president, the Attorney General, the FBI director, and you, the voters. And so she handed us that letter that she had written to FBI Director Kash Patel, demanding that she be brought all of those documents from the SDNY. And she hands that letter to us and says, this is the story. The fact that the SDNY, there are still deep state swamp creatures who are trying to subvert the president in the government at this moment. And she essentially said, I know why you're here at the White House. I know that you're going to be given access to the upper echelons of the Trump administration, because the mainstream media has proven themselves to be dishonest. She's like, here's a story for you. You can break this story. So we all understood what the story was. It's a very believable story that the SDNY would be hiding evidence or destroying evidence. We'd had other reports that was happening inside the FBI. So about at that moment, we get interrupted because the president invites us to come into the Oval Office. So we all, leave all of our stuff in that room and go across the hall to the Oval Office, which is an incredible experience. It doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. It doesn't matter how cool you are. It is just the weight of history in that place will give you the chills. And President Trump in the Oval Office is asking us questions and taking questions from us, giving us a tour. Megyn, he took a poll. He asked us to vote on whether we wanted a photograph or a painting of George Washington or Ronald Reagan hanging in the Oval Office. So he's entertaining us, essentially. At the same time, he is doing what he does best. People are walking into the room. Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, now former NSA, Mike Waltz, all these people are walking in the room asking him things. He's dealing with them, and then his attention comes right back to us without becoming distracted. It's like watching a conductor of an orchestra, to watch him manage the not just our country and the government, but the world in this way. It's incredible. We take pictures with him. He gives us hats and coins and pens and all the paraphernalia that he gives to guests in the Oval Office. And then we go back into the cabinet secretary room and we meet with another person or two. I don't remember who we met with after that. But then we realize, or the people running the event realize that the meeting has run overtime. The UK Prime Minister and his entourage were arriving and they were scheduled to be in that room. So we were ushered rather quickly out the back door of the Oval Office. Of course, you surrender your cell phone when you go in the West Wing and in the little wooden box downstairs. So we're all, of course, withdrawing from our technology, hoping to get to our phones as quickly as possible. We go out the back door with our coats and our hats and the binders in our arms. We go out the back door and we meet this gaggle of press that are camped out in the grass out back. Unexpectedly, they were there, of course, to try to get a glimpse of the UK Prime Minister. They see us, and Megyn, you should have seen their faces. They were so bitter, so unhappy, so surprised and annoyed that we were given access to the White House while they were out in the grass. That's actually what the smiles in those original photos were about, is they were just so jealous and bitter that we were laughing at them. We were taunting them. We were like, yeah, we were in the White House, and how's the grass feel today?
Because there were many of the influencers who were showing the binders and showing them off. I mean, I don't know whether you were one of them, but there were definitely some people there who were happy to show off what they'd just been given. And that's what led people like me to think, they're happy that they have these binders and they want the press to see that they've got the binders, and that it was sort of like a justice is coming thing. It wasn't, to me, it didn't read like a middle finger to the press, though it could have been. It read like we're about to get the truth. I mean, this is the thing that I've been hooked on all along, which is, why would the White House allow this? Why would they allow their, top surrogates, whatever, most loyal fans and friends in media to get embarrassed like this when they knew there was nothing in there?
Right. Well, and I think that's where the infuriating part starts, right? I certainly can't speak for the other people involved. I know I was laughing at the press. The press also noticed those binders. Of course they did. It's very prominently displayed on the front that says the Epstein Files. And they're like, what are you guys holding? They took pictures of them. I think our expectation, again, maybe I should speak here just for myself. My expectation is we're about 10 seconds, 30 seconds away from getting our phones. We're about to break this story ourselves. And we knew, of course, the context of the story was not, oh, this is the dirt, the Epstein Files. We knew the context of the story, but obviously people's reactions are going to be the same reaction that I just had when Pam Bondi originally showed me that binder. Oh my goodness, is this the dirt? Well, you pair that immediately with the, wait a second, the real story is the SDNY. So I have this expectation that we're about to break this.
Let me ask something about this, Liz, because this confused me, okay? Because I remembered this piece of the story. At least two of the influencers or whatever conservative personalities who were there tweeted out the exact same tweet after this thing went down. It had clearly been given to them by the White House. There's just no question, by somebody who was there. It was the exact same tweet. And so to me, it was obviously somebody within the administration who was like, this might be a great tweet to send to frame what has just happened today. And I pulled it just to remind myself of what happened.
I forget who it is, but I remember the explanation for this.
It was the people who tweeted it out included, let's see, it was Rogan O'Handley, who's right? DC, who's DC Drano, and Chad Prather. Yeah. And they tweeted the following. Today, I met with President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, AG Pam Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel in the Oval Office. They handed me a binder copy of the Epstein Files, the most transparent administration in American history. The best part? This is just the start. AG Bondi confirmed there are thousands more Epstein File documents being secretly held in the SDNY, and they will be delivered to the DOJ in D.C. by February 28th. People will be going to jail for what they've done. So this is so crazy because these people, clearly, if they were given this by the White House is trying to, or whoever.
I think that's worth clarifying.
Well, those two just happen to send out the same exact tweet?
Chad Prather actually came out later and said that he copied and pasted from DC Drano, and he apologized for doing that. And DC Drano, Rogan O'Handley, had written that himself.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense too. So why do you think they're saying, like, as his framing is, they gave us some stuff. We've got Epstein Files. They're the most transparent administration in history. And the best part is it's just the start. Like, it wasn't indignation. Your messaging seemed to be different that night. And I remember because you were more like, no, the binder's a scandal because it shows you that there's still a deep state out there that's got documents that's thumbing the middle finger even at the DOJ, namely SDNY, which appears to have the treasure trove of Epstein docs. Anyway, to me, it was just confusing. And I was wondering, not accusing anybody of doing anything wrong whatsoever, but I was wondering whether you guys were being given different messaging from the White House on this or just walked away with different takeaways because you were each confused or you just were all trying to figure it out in your own way.
Right. Well, I can't speak for Chad Prather. I can't even speak for Rogan, although I think highly of Rogan. I can only tell you we were not given any kind of, I would never actually do this anyway. Even if I were quote unquote given talking points, I would never do that. I'm not a spokesman for the administration. I'm a supporter of President Trump's America First agenda, but I'm not running interference for him in any way, shape, or form. But notwithstanding, we weren't given anything like that. I wasn't, at least. We were told exactly what I just detailed to you. We were given these binders, and then we were given that paper by Pam Bondi. She's the one who said that's the real story. And I actually asked her at the time because of what the cover sheet said. I asked her at the time, I was like, have you seen the SDNY documents? And she said no. She said she hadn't. That was probably the first red flag for me. Was Pam Bondi admitting that she had not seen those documents before she wanted us to launch this story. Now, when you're in a situation like that, you're like, okay, that's maybe not how I would handle it. Also something I when someone's on your side, this is what I've been saying all week. When someone's on your side, you give them the benefit of the doubt. I that day was hoping Pam Bondi would produce. You have to choose at some point whether you're going to trust someone, because even if you're a journalist, there's only so much verification that you can do unless you have access to the source materials. I obviously didn't have access to the SDNY documents. So I have to choose, okay, am I going to trust Pam Bondi or am I not going to trust Pam Bondi? When someone's on your side, at a certain point, you extend them the trust. And I thought, okay, she hasn't seen them, but she must be pretty confident in them or she wouldn't launch these binders in this way with this story. So you give her the benefit of the doubt. The thing is, Megyn, and this is something I didn't talk about because I thought because I wanted it. I wanted her to produce. I wanted her to live up to this benefit of the doubt that I extended her. That day in that room, Pam Bondi was bragging about making the cover sheet on that binder that read the most transparent administration in history, Phase 1 Epstein Files. She acted like she had made it on a Word document and printed it out herself and put it in the front cover of that binder. And to me, that is where, when you fast forward just a little bit to this past Sunday, and we have this announcement from the Department of Justice that suddenly says there is no client list, there's no blackmail operation, Epstein definitively killed himself, you're not getting any more documents, thank you, goodbye, no more questions. You know, my reaction is, what are you talking about? Not only did Pam Bondi go on Fox News and say, it is on my desk, she was asked about the client list specifically, so that while she didn't say the phrase client list, she said, it is on my desk waiting for review. I know 2 days ago she said I was talking about the Epstein files. Okay, maybe that's what you meant. That's not what you said.
Since President Trump was sworn in, his administration has made enormous progress at a breakneck pace. But don't forget, while they're moving mountains for the good of the nation, you've got your own personal savings to worry about. And one of the best ways to look after your savings is through diversification, particularly with gold, like from Birch Gold Group. In the past 12 months, the value of gold has increased by 40%. OMG. Central banks continue to bolster demand for gold by buying in record quantities. Global instability and tension is high, and Birch Gold makes owning physical gold extremely easy. Easily convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or buy some to store in your home safe. Just text MK to the number 989898 and Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. There's no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, take control of your savings today. Text MK to the number 989898. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.